Overnight, we saw another line of powerful storms move through, leaving tens of thousands without power, and many of them are still in the dark tonight. The metro area saw wind gusts higher than 80 miles per hour, which is as strong as a Category 1 hurricane.
In Houston, wind gusts hit 100 miles per hour. That's Cat 2 strength. Now, you can see the impact was devastating on the skyscrapers downtown. Take a look at that. That's shattered windows, sending broken glass raining down. At one point, nearly 1 million people were without power in Houston.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Katie Moore.
And I'm Cherise Gibson. Tonight, utility crews are up against the clock trying to restore electricity before more stormy weather arrives.
We have updates tonight on the power grid with live crews across South Louisiana checking out the damage.
But we start with Chief Meteorologist Chris Franklin. He was on air during the height of the storm, has the latest on what we can expect overnight. Those winds were really scary, Chris.
Yeah, they were. And the strong winds was the main threat that we were going to be dealing with that event moving through. Now, tonight's, or really more early Saturdays, is kind of a different scenario. We don't have a complex of storms already that we will be tracking. We're going to be watching kind of within this vicinity off the coast of Texas, maybe inland, maybe more the Gulf waters, for a disturbance to start moving our way and eventually start to develop the thunderstorm development, or start to develop those stronger thunderstorms. Now, when we take a look at visible satellite, really nothing showing up. There was kind of a little cluster of storms that had developed earlier over near Corpus Christi as they moved toward southwest Louisiana. They fizzled. So the models, again, have been doing an okay job with these situations, but I have lower confidence in the forecast as we go through the night. Now, most of the model guidance, with that said, all indicates everything happening after midnight, starting at about 1:30. May start to see some banding, training of rain. That could lead to some localized flooding in specific areas where these bands tend to set up. Where those bands set up is still very much an unknown, but it does look like this is primarily going to be an early Saturday morning, continuing during daylight hours, or at least the early morning hours, and then wrapping up well before lunch. So kind of a different scenario that we're looking at for the overnight and early Saturday morning, but mainly the threats will be from the strong winds again and the potential for some flooding. We'll take a look at some of the other computer models and look at the entire weekend in just a few minutes.
All right, Chris, thanks so much. A suspected tornado was blamed for damage in Romeville, that is in St. James Parish.
That's also where we saw some of the highest wind gusts, and parish officials say a tugboat on the Mississippi recorded gusts of up to 150 miles per hour last night. Amelia Strahans checked out the damage firsthand. She's joining us live now with a closer look at that. Amelia?
Well, it does appear that most of the damage is confined to this Romeville area. But take a look around. You can see there's some tree branches behind me. Behind that, there are quite a few pine trees that look like they are snapped in half, just like toothpicks. Quite a bit of damage to the homes around this area as well. But the good news is no one was hurt. Authorities say that no injuries have been reported, but around 40 homes were damaged and around 40 homes were damaged, and 900 homes and businesses in the area are still without power. According to the Department of Emergency Management, they could be without power for up to 2 days. With more potential severe weather on the way, officials are advising residents to pick up any limbs or debris in their yards. We spoke with a woman who was in her house with her daughter when that potential tornado came through. She says it's been an extremely difficult day.
We moved to the hall, we sat down, and then you heard it. Like everybody says, oh, it sounds like a train. It sounded like a train. The house started shaking. Almost felt like it was being lifted. She became really scared, so we started praying.
And city officials say that they hope to open a Red Cross shelter at some point for storm victims. I'll have more for you at 6 p.m. Reporting live, Amelia Strahan, WWL Louisiana.
Okay, thank you, Amelia. The New Orleans Fire Department rescued several people after high winds caused chaos at the New Orleans RV resort near Pontchartrain Park. Look at this. Firefighters say 3 RVs were flipped over. One of them was sitting on its roof just a few feet from the industrial canal. They quickly contacted Entergy to cut the power as they checked the scene out there. Firefighters rescued 5 people from the 3 damaged RVs and say 4 of them were taken to the hospital to be checked out. The storms overnight, they caused a lot of people to have to rearrange travel plans, and even some of them spent the night in the airport.
Yeah, that had to be a pain, and businesses today lost sales because they had no power. Meg Ferris continues our coverage, joining us live now from the airport, where with more on the mess Mother Nature made. Meg?
Absolutely, Sharice. Now, MSY is saying that those high winds and the severe weather that we had overnight did not cause any significant damage here at the terminal. There was a little bit of damage at some of the private areas with some of the private aircraft and the equipment on the airfield. Now, the terminal never lost power, and it does have full generator backup power. However, there were some technical glitches and some travelers with headaches. MSY workers spent the morning dealing with power surges, getting those flight displays to reboot, directing people around stopped escalators, while weary travelers got some shut-eye.
I got canceled my trip for 3 times. I've been here in the airport for 30 hours. I left my home yesterday morning, 3 in the morning. It was so bad. I'm so tired.
One traveler coming back home from the Houston airport captured the storm in Texas. It got so dark, it looked like nighttime.
Before I even sat down, they said everybody needed to get off the plane because high winds were coming. And you could hear everybody around me. Everybody's phone alarms were going off because they were getting tornado warnings.
She had to spend the night there with others trying to get to New Orleans for Tulane's graduation.
I felt most bad for people who were coming here for graduation because there were a lot of parents on the flight talking about how they were trying to make these ceremonies this morning, and unfortunately I think people missed them.
Another traveler went to fill up and return the rental car and found this: closed pumps because of the power outage.
So we had to bring the car into the return, and they said they weren't going to charge us for the gas, which I hope not, because their gas is $9 a gallon.
Along airline, no noon lines at fast food drive-thrus, no lighted signs or dine-in customers. Customers at Charlie's Automotive Car Care Center in Kenner will have to be patient, just like the travelers.
Everything was dark. You know, we have cars on the lift that all works by electrical, and we can't even let them down. It's just a big inconvenience.
How far behind is this going to put your work?
Oh, as far as Friday, I want to say probably 2 days.
One customer from Wagaman described his neighborhood post-storm.
Fences blown over, trees, limbs out in the middle of the street. It's like a tornado went through or something. It's a little inconvenient, but of course this is Louisiana.
Now back here at the airport, MSY says that each airline carrier makes the decision to fly or not fly. So if you have something, you need to check with your carrier to see if there are delays or cancellations. Reporting live from MSY, Meg Farris, WWL, Louisiana.
All right, Meg, thank you so much. The storms left several pockets of some more severe damage, and much of it appears to be caused by high winds. WWL meteorologist Alexa Trischler has been going through the damage reports and joining us now with a closer look at some of the trouble spots. Alexa.
That's right. The National Weather Service is actually confirming last night's event as a derecho because of how strong the winds were and how much ground that storm covered across the entire Gulf Coast. We'll show you in just a few moments how far that cluster of storms traveled. Of course, we had several reports of damage both sides of the lake. That radar confirmed tornado in St. James Parish. Still waiting to see the results from the National Weather Service. They're out surveying that damage to see how intense that tornado could possibly be, and if there were multiple tornadoes that touched down. We'll see about that once we get the latest from the National Weather Service. But here's a look at that Boeing line segment, that bow echo from last night. This is our radar imagery from last night when it moved into our river parishes and the tornado warning started going up. And then this is around 11:40 last night, the worst of the wind throughout the New Orleans metro and the North Shore happening around 11:40. And then the line continued to push eastward into southern Mississippi and continued to push along the rest of the Gulf Coast. And we'll look back at the entirety of last night's derecho. Started in Texas, moved across all of Louisiana, into the rest of the Gulf Coast, all the way through Florida, and eventually down even into the Florida Peninsula early this morning. So it was a long-lived event. That's why they're calling it a derecho. And here at home yesterday, we had that wind gust over 80 miles per hour at the airport in Kenner. Of course, we got more storms coming up overnight tonight. More details about that from Chief Meteorologist Chris Franklin in just a bit.
Oh yeah, we certainly had someone shaking my home last night. Entergy crews will be working as long as it is safe, rather, to do so, restoring power to the tens of thousands of customers that did go in the dark during the severe weather overnight.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mess, and Paul Murphy's joining us in Kenner's Rivertown. That's one of the areas hardest hit by this. A lot of people lost power there, Paul.
Katie, Charisse, we're on Daniel Street. It's a neighborhood in South Kenner, not too far from Armstrong International Airport. And as you can see, there is storm debris stacked up here in front of people's homes. Neighbors tell us that the lights flickered around 11:30 last night. That's when strong winds blew through and the power went out. And we're told that the winds associated with that strong line of thunderstorms gusted up to 80+ miles per hour here. That caused downed trees, tree limbs, and power lines. We talked with one man who told us the high winds blew his patio cover over his house, across the street, and into his neighbor's yard. Some of the debris also got tangled in nearby power lines. This morning, Entergy and AT&T crews were in the area restoring power and clearing the lines. According to Entergy, there were significant outages in Kenner and the western half of Jefferson Parish. That's because two of the transmission lines that feed Entergy's Pontchartrain and U City substations tripped offline this morning.
What had happened was these were not poles and wires that fell to disrupt electricity to houses and to businesses. Some of the extra high voltage lines that we have coming into the area, we had a disruption at two of our major substations in the area.
I was helping my daughter study. The lights flickered on and off a few times. The next thing I knew, my son said that one of the coolers was in the pool, and then we had a flash of lightning, and then that's when my wife realized the patio cover was no longer there.
And according to Entergy, about 100,000 customers across the state lost power during the peak of the outages, and the utility says that about 70% of those customers were powered back up by mid-afternoon. We're live in Kenner. Paul Murphy, WWL, Louisiana.
All right, Paul, thank you for that update. And here's a live look at the Entergy's outage map. Today, Jefferson Parish has seen the most outages. At one point, the total had reached nearly 11,000. Now it's down to just under 5,000. Officials at Entergy say the damage assessment this morning found a total of 60 poles and 35 transformers that need to be repaired or replaced. Now, we also have a restoration timeline. And unfortunately, the news is not good for some areas. Power should be back in St. Charles Parish and the West Bank of JP later tonight. Entergy says it will take until Sunday for customers in Tangipahoa, and it may not be until late Sunday night when the East Bank of JP and the river parishes have power again.